And we're moving along into the industrial sector together with SinterCast. I welcome their CEO, Steve Dawson.
Thank you. So, good morning. This is only our second time presenting in this forum. The first time was last September. We commissioned Aktiedagarna for research just in April of this year. So we're a bit of a newcomer. And I thought I would begin then with an introduction to SinterCast. We have developed a technology that enables the production of a new type of iron called compacted graphite iron, or CGI. The main application for CGI is when you have a mechanical load and a heat load, a thermal load at the same time. So our main product is engines. CGI is stronger and stiffer than the normal or the conventional iron, and that allows us to push engines harder so we can make them smaller and lighter and more fuel efficient. Our main application is in large vehicles, and of course it's the large ones that consume most of the fuel, so it's a real opportunity for us to make them more efficient and to make a larger CO2 contribution. We don't actually produce the iron. We are more like a service or a software provider, and we provide that technology to the iron foundries who produce the castings and send them to the automotive OEMs. We're only 27 people, but our technology was used for the production of approximately 1.5 million engines in 2023. Our business model, in the simplest sense, it's a royalty model. 95% of our revenue is recurring. 2/3 of that come from a production fee that is applied to every casting, and the remaining 1/3 is from the exclusive supply of the sampling consumables. It's a mature technology, it's a proven technology, and last year we delivered approximately 200,000 sampling cups, and what that means is that somewhere in the world, every 2.5 minutes, someone is taking a SinterCast sample. Yeah? To give a visual indication of our market development, 53% of our production is now for heavy-duty commercial vehicles, and 29% for the large Super Duty pickups that are sold in North America, 10% for full-size pickups, 4% is SUV and mid-size pickups, and also 4% in the off-road sector. So it's rail, marine, agriculture, construction. Yeah? So as I said, real focus on large vehicles. Let's continue with our introduction and see what we have achieved so far. So this is a plot of our series production growth over the last 15 years. Each of the data points is our quarterly production that we've reported in our interim reports. And there's always some bumps in the road, sometimes from the business itself. More often it's from the global economy. But we can approximate this growth with a straight line. And if you do the math, over the last 10 years, our compounded annual growth rate was 9.3%, and over the 15-year period, 12.1%. And this is always our target, to achieve double-digit growth. We have double-digit growth in our history, and in our industry, you have very good visibility over the nearest 3 to 4 years. It takes 3 or 4 years to go from a decision to start a new engine program to launching the production. So in our automotive field, we have very good visibility, and we can see the next 3 or 4 years, and we're confident that we continue this double-digit growth run. I'll come back to that later in the presentation. As 95% of our revenue comes directly from the production, and we also have double-digit growth in our revenue. And if you do that math over the last 10 years, it's exactly 10%. And I like to speak of our revenue more in terms of revenue per employee. As I said, we're only 27 people. And if you take our revenue from last year, it was 4.6 million crowns per employee. Our profit was 1.5 million crowns per employee. And last year, we had an operating margin of 31.8%. And we've published that we'll get to 40% before 2028. And we'll do that from both sides. We'll continue to have double-digit growth on the revenue side, but we'll also address the cost side. We have 4 of the employees, including myself, who will retire before 2028. And for 3 of those, the replacement is already in the company. So we won't increase the headcount. And I think that our operating costs in 2028 will be very similar to what they were in 2023. Yeah? So we attack it from both sides, and I'm really confident that we get above 40% operating margin by 2028. We are a pro-dividend company. Here you can see our dividend track record over the last 13 years. We gave our first dividend for the financial year 2010. Our compounded annual growth rate on the dividend is 21%. As we become more confident in the business, we lower the liquidity low point and share more of the success with our shareholders. We've had 14 consecutive years of increasing the ordinary dividend. If we are confident in the double-digit growth through 2030 and in the increased operating margin, that means the next 6 years are taken care of as well. So we get from 14 to 20, and then those last 5 years from 2030 to 2035 is a real exciting challenge, but I think that we can meet this goal of 25 consecutive years of increasing ordinary dividend. I mentioned in the introduction that we make engines smaller and lighter and more fuel efficient. So this is a screenshot from the EPA website in the United States. Any vehicle that's sold in America, you can go on the EPA website and see the fuel economy. So F-150 is the best-selling vehicle in North America. Our engine is base engine. So you can see on the left, the 2.7-liter V6, that's the SinterCast engine. And you can see also the other 2 engine options. So we are 0.6 liters per 100 kilometers more fuel efficient than the nearest available engine. And we make more than 300,000 of these engines every year. Yeah? So that really compounds in the CO2 saving, and it means a saving of about 1.3 million tons of CO2 per year for this vehicle alone. It's the same thing for commercial vehicles. On commercial vehicles, we make the engines more fuel efficient. Scania recently won the Green Truck of the Year award here in Europe. In fact, they've won it in 9 of the last 14 years. And in the last 8 of those, it was with a SinterCast engine. Scania has said that their new engine is 8% more fuel efficient than the previous generation engine. And that's a part of our contribution. And also on the Super Duty pickup side, the average driver of a Super Duty pickup using our engine option saves 1,000 liters of fuel per year. And we make more than 400,000 of those, more than 1,000 per day. So totally now, our CO2 contribution is about 10 million tons per year. And as our production increased, you can see this growth in our cumulative CO2 saving. We're now at 61 million tons as of first quarter of 2024. We've published a target to get to 100 million tons by 2028, and we think we'll be able to reach that a little bit early. Yeah? So transportation is an essential thing, and big vehicles are needed, whether it's for moving goods or for moving people. And what we do is to make that necessary transportation cleaner. So that's an introduction to SinterCast. Let's move on in the second half and talk about the market and the market outlook. So this is actual statistics for heavy-duty commercial vehicle sales in Europe and North America in full year 2023. And you can see that both markets are more than 96% diesel. Yeah? And let's start on commercial vehicle because it's not only our biggest sector, it's also our biggest growth opportunity. Today, 40-something% of commercial vehicles use compacted graphite iron. What we know is that as the legislation gets harder and engines have to become more efficient, that by 2030, the majority of them will. So we have said that the market will grow from 40-something nowadays to around 80% by 2030. There's a big discussion about what will happen in the sector. Yeah, there's new emissions legislation. Everyone talks about alternative technologies, whether it's batteries or fuel cells. And so let's put that in perspective. Just in March, on March 29th, the EPA in the United States published the rules until 2032. And just looking out until 2030, because that's the horizon that we've been talking about, the EPA requires that heavy-duty commercial vehicles have to reduce the CO2 emissions by 12%. And that's from the baseline of 2026 and compared to 2030. How will they do that? You know, let's assume that all of it is batteries. It won't be. But if we assume that all of it is batteries, the market opportunity for SinterCast will decrease from 100 to 88. Yeah? But at the same time, CGI will grow from 40 to more than 80. Yeah? So there's a very strong net growth for us, and that's what gives us the confidence of maintaining double-digit growth through 2030. The European Union has also published new emissions legislation just in April. It was on April 11th. And this is a screenshot from the EU website. Excuse me. It's difficult to compare it to the US because the US reduction is relative to 2026. The EU reduction is relative to the last emissions legislation, which was published in 2019. But they say that there will be a 45% reduction in CO2 emissions in 2030 relative to 2019. And we have to achieve that by bringing in some zero-emission vehicles. And the EU has defined what can be zero-emission vehicles. It means battery electric, hydrogen fuel cell, and also hydrogen combustion. So the hydrogen combustion engine, which seems to be becoming the preferred path, will look much like the engine of today, just using a clean fuel. In America, they have also accepted renewable diesel. So think of next generation biodiesel, not made from food products, but made from the stalk of the corn or used cooking oil or animal fat. They have accepted what are called renewable diesels or net zero fuels. In the rulemaking on 11 April in Europe, they couldn't make a decision about that. They said that they will come back to it in 2027. So we don't yet know the role for net zero liquid fuels in Europe. But I do think that the European elections, which we've had over the last week, will result in a positive decision for net zero fuels. I think long-term commercial vehicles will look much like they do today, just with clean fuels. The debate is moving from engines to energy. I'd like to, in the last phase of the presentation, do what I call talk from the top, because SinterCast can say things, but I want to share with you what the industry is saying. So this is from a presentation of the chairman of Toyota. It's the largest automobile manufacturer in the world, just from January this year. And he said, no matter how much BEVs, battery electric vehicles, progress, I think they will have a market share of 30%. The remainder will be hybrids, which have engines, fuel cells, and hydrogen combustion. See again this key on hydrogen. I have no doubt that engine vehicles will survive. And more recently, there was an interview with the CEO of Toyota in North America. And this is a screenshot from that newspaper. If you don't meet the CO2 requirements, you have to pay a penalty. It's called credits. But there's a very interesting quote at the bottom of this page. And he says, wasted investment is worse than the credit purchase. Yeah? The problem is that the 2020s, we still don't know what will prevail. Yeah? The 2020s are the decade of development and decision. And it won't be until 2030 that we really know what will be the product mix. And what Toyota is saying, we're not going to spend a lot of money developing things that may not be used in the future. We know what works. Toyota has taken a lot of criticism. Japan has taken a lot of criticism. In the Western world, Japan has the lowest penetration of electric vehicles, 1.5%. Yeah? They have prioritized hybrids. Have they really been wrong? From 2001 to 2019, transport emissions in Europe have grown by 4%. In the US, they've increased by 9%. In Japan, they've decreased by 23%. Have they really been wrong? Let's continue. So the headline here from Automotive News is prioritizing demand, and that's where the market is going. A couple of years ago, people were talking about targets for electric vehicle penetration, and really the OEMs got ahead of the market, and maybe the legislators did as well. And now we talk about prioritizing demand and meeting the customer's expectation. So this is from Mercedes just in February this year here in Europe. They delay their goals for electrification and they reinforce their commitment to their combustion engine lineup. What the CEO of Mercedes said in making this announcement, we're going to prioritize profit, not targets. And the Mercedes share price increased 5.9% after the announcement. In America, General Motors said that they would go directly from the current internal combustion lineup to battery electric vehicles, and that hasn't really worked for them. So just in February this year, they said, we went a half step too far. We're going to back up and go to hybrids as our primary solution. And let's look as well at our largest customer. Ford has done 7 SinterCast engines. They're our largest customer. And on the Ford Authority website, they talked about the CEO, Jim Farley, being interviewed in Autocar. And he was asked about the 2035 EV mandate here in Europe. When asked about the possibility that the 2035 EV mandate will effectively kill off internal combustion engine models in a recent interview with Autocar, Farley said, "Are you sure? I don't think we know. When you need a transit for your work, or you're a rancher with a pickup in the US, electric power is a terrible solution." He went on to say, maybe the solution will be hydrogen again, or the sustainable fuels thing is coming along, renewable diesel. And whenever someone starts telling me that they know the future, I hear a warning buzzer in my head. There are no certainties in our industry. I've heard this stuff 1,000 times. There have been a lot of blind alleys. You see a real consensus. Let's move to commercial vehicle. Let's come closer to home. And this from Scania, the CEO of Scania and the entire Traton group. He says their factory is ready, but the customer doesn't come. Scania sold just over 97,000 commercial vehicles last year. 246 were electric. It's a long way to go. And what he says below, you read it better than me, but he says it's going to take longer than expected. And the crosstown rival, Volvo, just from April 30th, he made an interview in the US, and this is the chief technical officer of Volvo. He says, far too many politicians across the globe want to ban technologies instead of telling us what they want to achieve. I think that we will need many different solutions. There is no silver bullet in order to decarbonize all road transport across the globe. We will need to have a little bit broader palette. He says, I have 15,000 engineers. I have 15. He says, I have 15,000 engineers, and they will develop the best technology to meet what you want to achieve, but don't ban technology. Stenquist stated that this year, in 2024, Volvo Trucks will spend more money on internal combustion engine development than ever before. He's not doing that to get to 2030. He's not doing that for the next 5 years. He's doing that for the next 25 years. So with a 25-year perspective, let's finish our talk from the top with the Department of Energy and the EPA in the United States. They have published what they call a blueprint to get to net zero transportation in 2050. And you can see in the bottom for the different types of transportation, will it be battery or hydrogen, which might mean fuel cell, might mean combustion engine, and sustainable net zero fuels. And what you can see here is that in 2050, there will be a mix. The solution is always a mix. Yeah? So I see that our market is growing and stable and secure for the long term. And I hope that this sharing of the technology from the different automotive engineers has helped to reinforce that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that presentation, Steve. I think we should start off in a recent event. We have just had a EU election. Perhaps we should touch upon how this might affect SinterCast in the future.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. So I showed the EU legislation. So that was approved as a draft law on April 10th, published on April 11th, and it has to be voted on by the new parliament. And certainly the new parliament has changed a lot. So there was a question over net zero liquid fuels. I do expect that the new parliament will approve that. Some of the voices from the right have said that it was a step too far. I think where the European Parliament will focus going forward is on reaching the targets in a cost-effective way rather than making the targets more severe. So for SinterCast, I think it was a good thing. We see that a lot of the green companies have suffered in the share over the last 3 days. SinterCast hasn't benefited. I don't think the market has connected the dots yet.
I understand. And moving along, I think perhaps we should touch upon the Chinese market, which has been, well, quite weak for the last few years. How is it coming along? I know you have deliveries towards FAW and Dongfang.
You're right. It has been slow. I mean, the Chinese economy has been really difficult for the last couple of years, and that has slowed everything. We had a new engine launch in China in 2022. It was a 16-liter engine. It was an expensive engine. It didn't go well at all. They withdrew from that. What we're doing with Dongfang is a new family of engines. There's an 11-liter, a 13-liter, and the 16-liter. And they've told us that the 13-liter will start next year, at the beginning of the year. So I think that we will get a strong ramp from that. We have said that the FAW production can give 1 million engine equivalents. Our current production is around 4 million, so it's a real growth opportunity. Let's see how fast they ramp. We have priorities inside the company, and one of the priorities is make China important. And I think going 2 years out, China will start to be important.
You mentioned your that 1 million motor equivalent might come from China, and you've set out a target to reach 7 million engine equivalents in 2028 at least. Today you're standing at around 4. Could we touch upon what's the strategy to reach your target for 2028? Yeah,
so getting from 4 to 7. I say we're currently at 4. We received the order from Scania, Traton, back in 2019. The production started in January of 2022. We said that that program would bring 1 million incremental engine equivalents. We're about 40% the way through the ramp. So the first step of the growth is obviously that Traton finishes their ramp, which will be over 24, 25, 26, and that will give us more than 500,000 engine equivalents. China, opportunity for 1 million. We talk in the industry about how we ramp. You know, is it like that, or is it a vertical ramp? We're hopeful for a vertical ramp at FAW. And then it's just new programs coming on stream. We're constantly working on new programs. The lead time, as I said, is about 3 years, so we know what will come on stream in 26, 27, 28. And the math gets us to 7 in 2028, yes.
Just by growing with your existing customers then, really?
New customers as well.
Okay. And perhaps we should, just one last question. And what do you think will be the most important thing to look out for as if you are an investor in SinterCast?
Legislation and how the market will evolve. I said the 2020s are the decade of development and decision. We don't know what will win yet. People are talking bold. But I personally feel that liquid fuels and hydrogen will prevail, especially in the sector where we work. For passenger cars, it's small. You can have small batteries. That's okay. For a passenger car, you need 750 kilos of battery. Yeah. For a tractor in a field, you need 10 tons. The tractor itself weighs 10 tons. It doesn't work. Yeah. For a truck, you need 10 to 14 tons of batteries. And there's a real challenge. Let me give you a statistic. So you talk about battery materials. It's graphite for the anode. It's lithium. It's cobalt. It's nickel. It's copper. Yeah? These materials, China has control of them. Yeah? China's control over those battery critical materials is double of the control that OPEC has on oil. Is that really the change that we're going to make? We're going to change from the dependence on 12 OPEC countries to China? OPEC controls 38% of the oil processing in the world. China controls 90% of the graphite, 71% of the lithium, 60% of the cobalt, and about 35% of nickel and copper. That trade isn't sustainable.
I think we need to end up there. Thank you so much, Steve,
Good.
from SinterCast.
Thank you.